Warning: this review may contain spoilers, strong language, violence, and content of a graphic nature. It may not be suitable for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey, welcome to another Trick or Treat Horror Fest. I'm DJ Surreal with Descent Sundays. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite movies, pretty much of all time. It's Natural Born Killers. For those of you who have never heard of it, I got a movie trailer for you.
Platoon. Wall Street. Born on the 4th of July. JFK. Oliver Stone's vision has changed the way we saw our past. Now he takes a look at where we are and where we're going. And you will be shocked at what he sees. And Mallory. Feared by thousands.
I love you so much, baby.
I love you.
Watched by millions.
We're fighting. Can't stop fighting. Nobody can. Let's go to Twilight Zone or something.
Woody Harrelson, Juliette Lewis, Robert Downey Jr., and Tommy Lee Jones.
What do you have to say to your fans?
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Natural born killers. In the media circus of life, they were the main attraction.
There are a lot of reasons why I really love this film. The cinematography is fantastic. There's some really great cuts. Which is unsurprising because apparently this film has like 6 times more than the average cut. I think I was reading somewhere it was like 13,000 cuts or something ridiculous like that, where a normal film has like 7,000 or something. There's a lot of really artistic devices used in the filming, and they work really well. The opening sequence is one of my favorites, just because it really, once again, it sets the tone for the whole movie. And it also just has some really, really great cinematic devices that are used, from switching between black and white to different sort of styles and different like speeds and tensions for the characters and the action that's happening. Overall, throughout the film, they use black and white footage to sort of indicate more internal voices of, basically internal thoughts of certain characters and how they see the scenes playing out. When you first watch it, those black and white segments usually happen immediately after a character says something, but if you watch very carefully, the black and white portion actually has a ever so slightly different connotation to it. Like, for example, in the opening sequence, you see the waitress flirting with Mickey, or at least talking to Mickey in the color, and then in the black and white she says the exact same thing, but she's got more of a flirtatious smile on her face, and she says it a little bit more suggestively. There's that sort of continues throughout the film, but like I said, it's very subtle. One of my favorite black and white moments actually is one part where you have this sleazeball true crime guy who runs this show, and he's talking to his editor, and the editor's complaining that they're repeating themselves too much, and he leans over.
Repetition works, David.
It's going to wind up with
Repetition works, Davey. Okay.
Do you think that those...
I don't know why, because I think it's because our society is so repetitive. So it's like, yeah, it just always makes me giggle, like every time. The whole movie is sort of a satire about how North American culture is obsessed with serial killers. Which makes it a little bit more funny because there's been numerous violent cases that this movie was actually implicated. Like if you watch Bowling for Columbine, which is the documentary about the Columbine shootings, they do talk quite heavily about how the two boys incessantly watched natural born killers. There was another case of two teenagers that both, you know, one assaulted someone and paralyzed them, and the other teenager actually killed someone, and they were also blaming watching natural born killers. In fact, the director Oliver Stone was actually sued in that case, and it was very highly publicized because, you know, all of a sudden the movie industry was like, "What's going on here?" Like, but I mean, also ultimately the it was not successful. Oliver Stone prevailed because, you know, how can he be responsible for other people's actions? You also can't blame a movie for how people act. Like, it's just kind of ridiculous. But yeah, there's been a lot of people have sort of blamed this movie for violent actions, which is even more funny because it's a satirical film, and obviously the satire is completely lost on those people who just see it as violent. So throughout the movie, you follow the story of Mickey and Mallory, who are two people who have been abused throughout their lives and end up on a violent romance where they go on a killing spree and they fall in love. And there is actually two versions of the film. There's the theatrical and the director's cut. And unlike some other movies, there is actually significant difference for the theatrical versus the director's. The director's is, I believe, a half an hour to 45 minutes longer than the theatrical cut. The main differences come mostly in scene extensions. Most notably, there's a scene where Mickey and Mallory have a hostage, and they get into a bit of a fight, and Mallory goes for a drive, and Mickey actually rapes the hostage, and that scene is extended in the director's cut. And the other main scene of note is actually the prison riot. Is, I believe, 15 to 20 minutes longer in the director's cut, and it's much more brutal. So if you're a little bit squeamish, I totally recommend watching the theatrical because they tone down the brutality. If you don't mind the brutality, definitely go with the director's cut. The prison riot's kind of a little bit more fun in terms of, you know, they're a little bit more graphic, and you actually, in the director's cut, you can actually see the warden's head on a spike that didn't quite make it into the theatrical. So, you know, just fun little things like that. The other super interesting thing about this movie is it's a very star-studded cast. There's a lot of prominent actors who are in it. But the thing is that when they actually do the prison scene, for the first 2 weeks of shooting, some of the extras that were in the prison were actually prisoners for violent crimes. In fact, there's the one scene where the warden's walking through the cafeteria and you see this Caucasian gentleman, and he's bald, and he's eyeballing, you know, one of the other inmates. Interestingly enough, that particular person is a convicted murderer. He brutally murdered his wife and 2 children by beating them to death with a crowbar. And Oliver Stone made him more of a feature in the movie because he scared the crap out of him. And he's like, man, that dude just looks scary. I want him in the film. So I thought that was really interesting when I read that. I was like, oh, because you think that would be really dangerous having all these people in with like seriously violent offenders. As it turns out, they in the last 2 weeks of filming the prison riot, they actually had to bring in extras because a bunch of the prisoners did get wound up, and there was some inappropriate behavior, and so they ended up having to stop using the prisoners and actually bring in extras to do the remainder of the filming. Overall, it's pretty interesting too. The other thing interesting cinematography wise is that there is actually no camera angles that are completely straight in this entire film. Everything is shot on varying degrees of an angle. Some of them are so slight that you don't really notice, and then others are pretty extreme. But the point is that it's all slanted. It's never, you're not looking at anything horizontally dead on. It's just all off kilter, which sort of adds, in my opinion, to the satirical element. There's so many layers of depth to this movie, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why I love it so much. There's so much you can do with it, and there's so many small, tiny little artistic choices that may not necessarily be apparent to you the first time you watch it. One artistic choice that I really thought was great and sort of adds into the whole social commentary and feeling of the film is that Oliver Stone actually includes real commercials in the movie at certain parts. And I read that he did that because he finds that commercials are soothing for people when they're watching something brutal. I never really thought about it that way watching the movie. I always just loved the fact that those got tied in because it once again ties into the whole media obsession about serial killers and the fact that they're not actually seen as people but as entertainment. So adding the commercials for me was like just sort of really hammered in that idea. One thing I thought was kind of funny is that Coca-Cola, there's actually a polar bear commercial, an old polar bear commercial from Coca-Cola that you see in the film. And Coca-Cola actually did give permission for that commercial to be placed in the film, not knowing what type of film it was. So when they finally saw the finished product, they were actually pretty pissed apparently, which is kind of funny because I actually really love the Coke commercial there. It's like aptly timed. It's great. Anyway, overall, Natural Born Killers is a really amazing movie, a total treat. Highly recommend it, and like I said, if you're a little bit squeamish, watch the theatrical version. Or if you're just watching it for the first time, maybe watch the theatrical version. And I could talk about this movie for hours on end, but I won't. We'll save that for another time. Thank you so much for joining me for this review, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.